let's go. So welcome everyone to our session on building and construction roadmaps. Okay, I'm trying my best so everybody can hear me well here. With the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, we have actually started developing first a global roadmap with the idea on how we can go towards decarbonizing buildings, but also looking at the resilience. So not only talking about decarbonization roadmaps, but basically talking about buildings and construction roadmapping, having a holistic view on how you can address the climate change issues in the buildings and construction sector. So we started with the International Energy Agency to develop that global roadmap. And after that, we developed 3 regional roadmaps, one for Africa, one for Latin America, and one for Asia Pacific. And those 3 roadmaps then were also used for us to work with the UNFCCC actually for the human settlements pathway. And we are co-leading the human settlements pathway under the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action, which is actually the climate champions and also engaging the private sector in the transformation of or in acting on climate change overall. So today we're going to have 2 sessions in this event. A first discussion that will be more looking at, okay, we came with the roadmaps, but and then we said this is a model, and then we have a number of friends and organizations that we work with and are also part of the global ABC that said, okay, we're going to help you bring those roadmaps and translate them what they mean at the national level. But there was no real, like I say, tool or methodology yet developed, so everybody went and tried their own approaches. And for I would say the last year, more or less, we've started bringing a roadmaps group together. Even before that, we had the roadmap group under the Global ABC, and we started developing a toolbox, because actually we think now that we have learned from some of the processes at the national level, we are looking at all the ones that tried to develop these roadmaps and what did they learn from it. And from there, we are now trying to adapt a little bit the framework that we came up at the beginning to some of the realities from what we learned at the country level. So actually, to start with, we will have a presentation from my colleague Geoffrey Morgan from UNOPS, who is actually helping us developing our step-by-step guidance and tool. I think even before we were supposed to have a little video, but I don't know whether we have the presentation or video before.
We have a video.
Okay, so a nice little video for all of you to see.
The Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction was the initiative of France and created at COP21. The idea was that actually the building sector has been overlooked in all the discussions in the climate and in the decarbonization agenda overall. When we talk about decarbonizing, it's not just thinking about the operational side of things. Once a building is constructed, how can we actually use less energy in the building? It's actually also about all the construction process and everything that we put into construction materials, the roadmap in itself. What is really important is bringing all these different actors together so that they understand how they can increase collective impact.
The first thing is we need to change the mindset of the stakeholders. Go for alternatives for river sand. Always don't use traditional materials. Go for fly ash brick. Don't go for clay bricks. Don't get earth resources for our productions. We have a lot of alternatives we can go for.
The question is, why is it that over the years we've not been able to make a considerable impact in the use of local building materials? Statistically, 60% of Ghanaians need some form of government intervention to be able to access housing. And we think that if we develop our local building material industry, it is one of the components that we will be able to use to unlock that affordability discourse.
In India, what we see right now is that the material consumption is following very drastic patterns. We understand that the building and construction sector represents a huge percentage of that overall material use, and therefore it then becomes a huge leverage point as well and a point of intervention for moving towards the responsible consumption and production patterns we talk of. The sector represents a huge opportunity in terms of not only being able to mitigate climate impacts, but also represents a huge economic opportunity in moving to greener buildings and construction practices.
It is different from country to country, and that's why the roadmaps are also such a good tool. Over the next 50 years, we'll see tremendous growth. We need good buildings, we need many buildings, and we need to make sure we build them in the right way. And the roadmap is basically what can show you the way, how you can get there.
One of the reasons that UNOPS was brought into this process is due to the fact that we are an implementation agency. So while developing the tools and the guidance for the creation of the roadmaps, we're very much keeping in mind the fact that we do not want this report to be sitting on someone's desk. We need to make sure that it is implementable by key stakeholders.
Halving construction emission today, it's possible, but it needs a radical collaboration, needs really a holistic approach from the beginning, and making sure that all the stakeholders from material provider, architect, engineer, developer, financial institution, user, they all need to come together to make sure that we achieve that.
Il y a un besoin important pour les acteurs d'avoir une compréhension commune de ce que nous entendons par la décarbonisation du secteur du bâtiment, où on a besoin de tous les acteurs de façon inclusive.
Thank you. So this was a small video that we actually recorded with UNOPS at the Global ABC Assembly last year. And many of the people you've seen here, including me, actually, you will also see a number of them that you saw on the screen sitting here again and talking about the roadmaps. I'm not going to take more time, but I think Geoffrey, who actually you also saw in the video, is going to talk a bit about what we're doing now to build our tool and guidance for those roadmaps based on all the experience to date with developing national buildings and construction roadmaps. So, Geoffrey, you're online. Over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Jonathan, for the introduction and for all of your attention today. So, I'll be talking a little bit about the Global ABC roadmap guidance and tools that we've been creating to support roadmap creation. Slide.
Sorry.
Right. So I'm sure it's going to surprise nobody in the audience today is that the buildings and construction sector is responsible for 37% of global emissions, but that we're quite significantly off track at the moment. Slide. But we know that this is not actually a technological gap. And it was something that was discussed at the Buildings Breakthrough event earlier this week, is that it's actually more of an action gap. And I think a key figure that kind of exemplifies this is that only 26% of countries have mandated building codes for energy performance. And this is clearly showing that we need action. We need governments to step up and make decisions that will support the achievement of the decarbonization of our buildings. Slide. But in order to know what actions are needed, we need to create a roadmap of all of those key actions. And the Human Settlement Climate Action Pathway Objective has stated that by 2025, all countries should create a national roadmap for decarbonizing the built environment, which clearly sets out the actions that are needed to be able to achieve that key objective. Slide. However, we have a very long way to go. There's something that Jonathan was saying a moment ago. We've been able to have a number of roadmaps already, but at the moment we only have 16 out of the 196 countries that are out there. So we have a lot of work ahead of us to actually achieve that objective. Slide. So one of the things that the working group between UNOPS, UN Habitat as part of the Global ABC, and others identified that one of the things that was really missing to support governments to develop these actionable roadmaps was a robust and standardized methodology. These previous roadmaps had all been kind of developed based on the individuals' approaches from the individuals that are involved in their creation. So we wanted to create a methodology that had step-by-step guidance that was underpinned by clear tools to be able to allow each country to be able to develop their own pathway to have more sustainable construction of their buildings. Slide. So to do this, we started off by collecting lessons learned from the individuals who created those original 16 roadmaps. We also then interviewed people of the expert working group of the 60 plus members as part of the Global ABC Roadmap Hub. Based on that information, we then proceeded to develop a new roadmap framework and the step-by-step tools and guidance that are now being piloted in 6 countries, in Ghana, Senegal, Bangladesh, and 2 states within India, so that we then can take further lessons learned on that guidance to improve it, and so that we can release these tools and guidance in 2024 to support the upscaling so that hopefully all missing countries will be able to have a roadmap in the near future. So the updated Global ABC framework is based around 4 key objectives, which is around having 0 embodied carbon, 0 operational carbon, climate adaptation or resilience, and that they're inclusive as well. And these 4 objectives are cross-cutting across each of the 5 action areas, which is around the setting and following through of strategic priorities, the spatial and urban development, looking at existing buildings, looking at new buildings, and looking at the construction supply chain. Slide. And we're using that framework and to develop a 6-step, step-by-step methodology that supports countries to move from step 1 in terms of mobilization. So what are the key resources you may need to develop a roadmap? What type of expertise, knowledge do you need to be able to then move forward with the creation of the roadmap? Mapping out the key stakeholders for engagement. Who do you need to be able to champion the creation of this roadmap, help you set objectives? Who do you need to get key information from? And then moving importantly into the meat of the assessment, the baseline assessment. What are the actual challenges that exist? Where is the embodied carbon or operational carbon? Where are the risks? So that we can then prioritize any challenges and needs based on the opportunities that we're seeing to then create and translate those into tangible actions with timelines and targets for implementation. So the main piece of the assessment is very, very holistic. It's based around looking at the physical and the enabling environments. So the physical assessment is using much more of a quantitative approach, trying to calculate the amount of embodied carbon that exists within a country to be able to, and then look at growth patterns to project, if we're using it business as usual, what might the amount of carbon emissions associated with our construction patterns be moving into the future, and how far off may we be from our objectives, to then looking at the enabling environment to say, what are looking at the 7 enabling domains in the enabling environment that kind of support how buildings are and their construction are controlled by looking at the more qualitatively the institutional arrangements, the policies, laws, and regulation, the institutional processes, stakeholder engagement, the financial management and funding, the available knowledge and technical capacity of both government and private sector, and also then the data management and reporting to inform decision making. Slide. So based on that assessment, we can then do a gap analysis to say, well, based on our objectives across the physical and enabling environment, how well are we achieving our objectives? How far away are we? So that we can actually start to create kind of more targeted interventions. Next slide. So we're hoping that by using this approach, we can move away from the kind of business as usual that we have right now in terms of how our buildings are constructed, so that we can actually create that physical or tangible action, so those actions can be prioritized and implemented, so that we can move against that kind of business as usual emissions projection to achieving our target for decarbonizing the buildings and construction sector. Next slide. We're hoping that by the creation of this kind of standardized methodology and approach underpinned by guidance and tools, that we can then catalyze our contribution to be able to support all countries to have their own climate action roadmaps for buildings and construction, so that we can move forward with action by implementing short, medium, and long-term actions to make sure that we can achieve our climate goals for the decarbonization of our buildings and construction sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you, Jeff, for presenting a bit what we're currently working on. And, we are learning a lot from all our colleagues here that have been working on roadmaps and trying to integrate also what they have been doing. We are not the only ones working on roadmaps, but, we are definitely bringing the group together of those that are working on this. To continue discussing a little bit with some of these partners that have been working with us, I want to invite our panel members. We are going to discuss a few key points today. Why roadmaps? How do we do it? Who should be involved? And then talk about some of the challenges about it. So I would like to invite Smith Mordack, who is the CEO from the UK Green Building Council. And then I would like to invite Nikhil Kolsepatil, Program Coordinator on Energy and Climate in ICLEI South Asia. I would like to invite Riyad Bahar, Associate Director, Energy and Sustainability and Infrastructure at Guidehouse. And I would like to invite my colleague Leah Ranalder, Specialist Sustainable Cities at UN Habitat. Okay.
Yeah. Squeeze a little bit so you can see the screen.
There are not going to be any presentations on the screen, but you don't need to squeeze.
No?
You want me to sit in the middle? Okay, I'll come and sit in the middle. All right, I'm the moderator. Okay, so I'm going to start actually with a question for you, Leah. I mean, Leah, you and I, UN Habitat, UNEP, we've been working together on roadmaps also with our colleague Jeff from UNOPS in a few countries already, and we actually worked in Sri Lanka and Burkina Faso for the development of this buildings and construction roadmap, and we are now working together, building on that work that we did before in Ghana, Senegal, and Bangladesh. And I wanted to hear from you what you see as some of the key lessons learned from what we've been doing so far.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. And by the way, amazing to see a full room when we talk about roadmaps, which is great because it's not often a natural topic that people are getting so excited about. So I'm really happy to see so many faces in the room. Maybe just, I feel like after this video and Jeff's presentation, there's not much to add because it was very comprehensive. But I'm here to maybe shed a little bit of light of what have we learned when you take these wonderful models and actually turn them into action on the ground. And Jonathan, you mentioned, we work together in Burkina Faso, Sri Lanka, and now coming up in Ghana, Senegal, and Bangladesh. And let me maybe share three key takeaways on what, these learnings. The first one is the importance of participatory processes. Really mapping out who are the different stakeholders engaged, bringing them together. It's often stakeholders that come from a very broad range of backgrounds. National governments, local governments, developers, architects, manufacturers, people in the construction industry. So it's a lot of different people. And maybe just as a comparison, I talked to somebody who was working on transport and they said, if you want to do action on transport, it's so easy. You have like 3 stakeholder groups, you bring them together in one room, and you could actually change a lot and say, okay, well, national government, manufacturers, and we shift to electric vehicles. In buildings, it doesn't work that way. There is a lot more stakeholders in the room, and they, of course, all have different priorities and different perspectives. So bringing them all together, first of all, mapping out who they are and what they want is so important. And then as a second point, as a B to my participatory processes, is balancing these diverse interests and understanding maybe also that these people might have never talked to each other before coming into the room for creating a roadmap together. So you cannot assume that people have actually talked to each other. Then, as a second point, is this importance of the baseline assessment, so understanding where are you actually today, and what is the local context, what is the national context, what does the building sector look like today, but also tomorrow, what's the urbanization that can be expected, and what are the implications on the material use, on the construction demand, on the building demand, and how will overall the building stock evolve, because it might look very, very, very different from country to country. And then as a last point, maybe some of these challenges, and I think some of these might not surprise you, is the lack of data that's out there, the lack of technical capacity that exists, keeping all of the stakeholders involved and ensuring that this process is important to them and that they see what they can get out of this. But then also seeing that there's so many different levels and frameworks and policies that might be competing with one another. So I think you said it already before, the video said it, I think, several times before, the importance of collaboration and really bringing people together and working across these different levels of government, but also with these different stakeholders is critical.
Thank you, Leah. I mean, definitely the stakeholders, that's the whole idea of when we started the Global Alliance for Buildings and Construction, talking about a very fragmented sector with a lot of different actors. How do you start bringing them all together so that we can speak to each other and find a way on how, to make this transformation happen, which is a serious transformation that we need, and it's a quite steep, I would say, way that we have to go up. But one of the things that we've been thinking when we talk about the Global Alliance, we would like, in a sense, to see national alliances also starting, so that at the national level, all these actors also talk together and come together behind the vision. So very important point, data. We know we're working in some countries where they don't even know, in any case, what their building stock is. I was working in Cambodia on a roadmap a few years ago, and they only knew the permits that they had been giving out over the last 10 years. That's what they knew about their building stock. And even then, they didn't even know if those buildings had been constructed. So it makes it very difficult when you want to get to some quantitative information, which is what we need at some point to convince decision makers and also to take action. I'm going to turn to Smith Mordak because Smith, you've been working actually on a UK net zero whole life carbon roadmap with the Green Building Council. I know that the World Green Building Council actually has been working on a European level roadmap and working in 10 countries on a similar roadmap, actually, that the one you're doing in the UK. And I would like you maybe to say a bit more about what actions you have identified. Of course, it's a different situation than what we were discussing here. Maybe there's more data, but maybe you can say that there are still challenges related to data. But can you tell us a bit, what have you identified as some of the key actions, and maybe also talk a bit about how, it helps shaping the UK climate strategies?
Sure. Thank you very much for having me here at the Buildings Pavilion. I really want to echo everything that you've said there about collaboration and getting all of the voices and all of the stakeholders who are impacted by changes involved in the conversation. I think that's really critical. So we've got 2 roadmaps on the go, and maybe I'll get to talk about the other one in a minute. But to speak about the whole life carbon roadmap first, we're at a very interesting testing stage with that roadmap at the moment, because we initially prepared it for COP26 in 2001. So we worked with hundreds and hundreds of organizations from across the built environment to understand really sort of what is the baseline, where are we at the moment in the UK with the carbon footprint of the built environment. And that includes both the kind of operational emissions, but also the embodied carbon emissions as well. And we looked at that on a consumption basis, so considering imports as well as things that would be considered part of the UK's kind of carbon footprint, which is really important. Understanding that baseline, understanding what the vision is for 2050, a net zero built environment roadmap, and then charting a pathway between those two things. And that was a huge piece of work that involved many people, many conversations, and really kind of complex interactions between the different sectors, and not only within our sector, but also the energy sector, or how many new homes are we going to be building? How many homes do we need to build? How much can we assume that the grid is going to decarbonize, and so on. So it's lots of very complicated conversations. And I think that's the real power of roadmaps, as is kind of coming out in this conversation. It's having that really kind of granular understanding of what needs to happen between now and that vision that we have. But the last couple of months, we've actually done a bit of a where are we now on against that roadmap. So having a look, we now have, since we did that roadmap for COP26, we have 4 more years of data, so we could see where we were. And so, yeah, unsurprisingly, you will not be surprised to hear we are not where we need to be. It was sort of our own stock take, if you like. So we should have been able to see a 19% decrease in emissions between 2021 and 2023. But in fact, we only saw a 13% decrease. And of course, everybody who has lived through the last 4 years knows that they have been an extraordinary 4 years. We have had a pandemic, we have had shutdowns, we have had changes in behavior that have affected things in a really kind of unexpected ways. So even the emissions reductions that we have seen aren't kind of systemic, sustained changes. They're things that have been extraordinary. So this is really sort of now we launched this on Buildings Day just a few days ago, and we're now working with the industry to figure out, okay, well, this is where we are, so now what do we need to do next? And maybe just to pick up on your point about the way in which this helps shape action, because we did this very rigorous piece of work that involved voices from across the built environment, now when we go to governments and we speak to either governments, national governments, subnational governments, cities, or others in industry, we're able to say, look, really, we need to do these things. We've made these recommendations, and it's really clear why these actions are so important, because we all have to do these different parts. Otherwise, the roadmap collectively doesn't decarbonize, and that's really what's central.
Thank you. I mean, definitely, I think, it's not easy to make sure that all the people understand what we're talking about. And so we're talking earlier about baseline and a good understanding of where we are. I think that's critical, and some of our colleagues from the countries will certainly talk about it. But, if you go to a country and you work in a ministry, well, you're not aware of everything, and there are a lot of actions happening by different actors, and sometimes you don't know. And even sometimes they're not all in the same ministry. So even that is complicated. So it's really important to actually bring all these people together, and so try to align everyone and actually to build on each other's work, I think also. So that's a very important element. But then you mentioned the second roadmap, and I know that, the second roadmap is about resilience. So we've made the choice with these roadmaps to kind of call them climate action roadmaps, where we also integrate the resilience side. But I would be happy to hear about the process that you are now taking for this resilience roadmap, and maybe also if you can point a little bit, how different it is, or how maybe you are trying to see whether you can link the two in some way also.
Yeah. So happy Nature Day, everyone, because and it's really great to be able to have this conversation on Nature Day here. So thank you for that. But we're trying to take everything that we learned from creating the Whole Life Carbon Roadmap, and I think one of those things is those relationships, because actually once you've built those relationships around understanding the roadmap, through going through that process, that is one legacy of the roadmap process as well. So we're able to now build on that for the resilience roadmap. But of course, as speakers on the stage earlier were speaking about, like the kinds of metrics and the kinds of ways in which we measure progress towards resilience is much more complicated. There are so many different like integrating factors in terms of water, biodiversity loss, and so many different hazards, sort of overheating and flooding and wildfires and so on. And the interactions between all these things are very complicated. Also, we don't just have one scenario. It's not just we need to get to net zero by 2050. We might have 1.5 degrees of warming. We might have 2 degrees. We might have 3.5 degrees. We might have 7. Like we have to look at a resilience roadmap against a number of different potential climate scenarios and a number of different sort of socio-economic scenarios that relate to those different climate scenarios. So what we're doing is we're taking an adaptive pathways approach where we sort of understand, well, these are the different potential scenarios and these are the potential kind of trigger points that might mean that a certain action is going to need to come into play. So if we see weather events taking this kind of a turn, then we know that these kinds of policies are going to be required. If we see that the industry is shifting in this way, then we need to know that these kinds of things. So it's rather than kind of the whole life carbon roadmap, which is kind of a point to zero. Sorry, do it your way around. A point to zero. XY. It's a kind of divergent roadmap. And so it's like, well, these are all of the different potential pathways that we could take, and we need to be adaptive. And I think that's what's really at the heart of the link between the two roadmaps, as well as that adaptation and being able to be flexible, so that actually, depending on what happens in other sectors, depending on what happens in other regions, in other countries, and so on, we need to be able to adapt to that for both roadmaps.
Yeah, I think it's a very, very critical part. Like, we don't know what our buildings will need to look like, or what kind of performance even they will need to have in the future. So that's something that, I know that it's a very important element for a number of countries. I mean, some of our colleagues that will be talking here later, Bangladesh, when we talk about adaptation, it's probably more important than mitigation in many ways. Even if you talk about Senegal, Ghana, I mean, talking about heat waves, but not only. So I think that there's really an important element to bring this adaptation element very strongly, and it might actually have impacts on our net zero carbon or whole life carbon approaches that we are looking into. So it's a challenging one, that one. And indeed, it's about scenarios, and also the problem is more that it's long term. We know decarbonization seems relatively easy, although it's not that easy in the building sector. I'm going to move to Nikhil. So ICLE has been working actually on roadmaps, but city-level roadmaps, so our city-level action plans, I should say. So probably building on some national roadmaps. And I mean, you recently published the Zero Carbon Buildings Roadmap for the city of Nagpur in India. And could you tell us more a bit about, moving from national to city, how that takes place, and what are the challenges that you find, and what are some of the key takeaways from the process from your perspective?
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So this roadmap, just to clarify, it was led by the city. We just supported it, of course, through the Buildings Efficiency Accelerator. But I think why city roadmaps are important is because there are a number of statistics, and I think I speak for Asia in general. In India, for example, in 2 decades, there's statistics bandied around that 50 to 70% of built environment is still going to be constructed in the next 2 decades or so. That is a significant chunk if you look at India's size or some of the Asian cities. And all this is only in urban. So that is an opportunity, and that is where, that is, and I think, Jonathan, also in a preparatory call for this session, I think you simplified it really. You said the city roadmap is the first step for implementation, and I think that really nails it. And that's why that is important, because really there is also multiplicity, duplicity of frameworks at the national level, so there's no clarity, and that is why you need to build city roadmaps in a participatory manner. Coming to Nagpur, so this is a medium-sized city in India, in central India, a population of around 2 million plus, so not really one of the large Indian cities. But why a roadmap helped here is because then you really can tailor the roadmap, an action plan rather, to to the city's context. So this is not really an industrial center. It's not a big commercial center. It's mostly an administrative center. The type of the building subtypes you can focus on are completely different. There's not a local market, in terms of real estate where you have big private sector players and so on. There's no supply chain. So these are the challenges which are there locally, which the roadmap can help address. Also, this roadmap is one of the first zero carbon roadmaps for at a city scale for buildings in India, and it helped to leverage and build on the city's ambition for climate, because they already have a climate action plan in place. They also are taking action on that. The city has done a number of initiatives it has taken on residential building efficiency, on affordable housing, on benchmarking of public buildings. So the roadmap could tap into and leverage all these actions and sort of, have I would say it really gives a local blueprint for action and investment in the city. And that's why it was important. I think that's important. It's important to have roadmaps locally to, of course, I would echo what everyone is saying, that you need local participation. You also need city leadership and commitment in this process, because it can't be that, an external agency comes and does this. So you need institutional mechanisms in place which can be built out, but that is a key aspect as well. A few, I think, critical sort of key takeaways from the process. We would say that the roadmaps also need to be actionable at the city level. Like everyone is saying, it can't just be a document that lies on someone's desk. So this needs to be actionable, and that is where bringing together all the stakeholders works, because really the private sector, the industry players know what are the blocks, what are the challenges. So for instance, in Nagpur, we figured out that what we heard is the sustainable materials and certified materials for buildings are not really available at all. And that is a challenge. And, then how do you really promote that or suggest that as a strategy in the near term? So that is something that would be addressed maybe in the mid to longer term. So things like this really important sort of in terms of, utilizing local knowledge, good practices as well. On data, I would say there is a lot of focus on data and on evidence. And of course, we also build a number of cross-cutting action plans, as we know. But in terms of buildings, I would say that with the city, we decided quite early on that if the data is not available, it's fine. We can build it out over time. There's no point chasing data. You can rather focus your resources on getting the right strategies identified. Because in Asia, in general, in South Asia especially, you don't really have information on product life cycle, product carbon footprint and such. Even building stock information is sketchy. But I think if you can identify which are the major subtypes and what areas really need intervention, that should do the trick. A key point, I think, also in the South Asian context, and I think largely in the global South, is there's a large informal sector as well in the building industry, which, the roadmaps need to speak to that and sort of, address all the challenges in terms of capacity, financing, also involvement of them, because those are the actors who actually construct buildings, or if you're aiming to retrofit buildings, those are the actors who really do that. Yeah.
And that's a big challenge, because when we are moving into the formal and how to address that, I would say even more broadly, because I said it already earlier, there's a lot of self-construction happening in many countries, and how do you actually really make sure that the roadmaps also kind of support that way? And that's where, the transformation of the industry is really important, the building of the skills, but making sure that, also the people can access those materials, for example, that are, better, greener materials overall. In cities overall, I think there are many cities that are actually really taking action and that are looking, I would say, already climate champions more than governments in some cases. So I think cities are really a very good entry point, and it's really good to leverage on them, and they definitely play a strong role in the implementation. I'm going to move to Riyadh. We have done a number of roadmaps, and then the regional roadmap, but then we also start looking at sub-regional roadmaps, because in many areas of the world you will have already some cooperation between countries. With the IEA, we did the roadmap for Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia, they have their ASEAN. ASEAN is a platform where all the ministers come together, they talk to each other, and there's a lot of, I would say, exchanges between the countries, for materials or other things. And that I think is, having some sub-regional roadmaps helps the cooperation between the countries. And Riyadh, you've been working actually on a roadmap for this region here. I would say the Arab League countries, which is actually a pretty big group of countries. It's about 22 countries. It's pretty big. And I would like to, maybe to hear a little bit more from, what are the benefits, of developing building and construction roadmap in that context. I mentioned a few points from my side, but you can probably add to that. And maybe, a point that is important for me is are countries really having this interest in buildings and construction? Do they see the importance of the buildings and construction roadmaps in the context of climate? And what are they looking for?
Thank you, first of all, for inviting me. So, as you have stated, the Arab region is pretty heterogeneous. So we're talking about, like I said, 22 countries, and there are two super heterogeneous. So you have UAE, which is pretty advanced, but you have also countries like Djibouti or Somalia, which are really in the first steps, maybe not even considering, so to say, the topic of low carbon or energy efficient buildings. And that was somehow also our focus, to try to respond to the different development stages in that region, and not talking to one region as it's really a unique or not one region, so to say. What we have done, first of all, really a kind of mapping exercise where we split the whole region into 3 development stages. Early phase, moderate, and front runners, and try to tailor, so to say, approach towards the development phases. And depending on the development phases, also the awareness and the interest, of course, of sustainability differs. So, of course, UAE with the COP, but also other ambitious programs and frameworks are leading somehow the region, while other countries are really need to take the first steps in first of all setting the regulative framework, or understanding the building stock and building typology. In that sense, our exercise was more a desk-based work, where we have then picked up 3 representative countries for each development phase. We took Sudan for the early starters, Egypt for the moderate phase, and UAE for the front runners, and try to dive a little bit into those countries a little bit deeper, and try to understand, okay, first of all, that was the crucial step. Where do they stand? What did they have produced already, or what have they done? And then tailored, so to say, mini roadmaps for those development phases.
Thank you. And I was wondering, as out of that process, because 22 countries are a lot of countries, did it trigger, for a number of countries, say, we want a national roadmap?
Okay, we did it for a client who kept it somehow a little bit for itself. No, he shared it with the League of Arab States, which is the umbrella of the things. We haven't been involved in that sharing, so to say. Though there's definitely one country which is also confidential, which is considering to really dive into a national roadmap, and we hope to be able also to support this national roadmap very soon.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
We are almost at the end of this session. I have another 2-3 minutes, and I'm just wondering whether there's anyone that has a question. And 1, 2, 3 questions.
Thank you. Actually, you were talking a lot about different point of views on the roadmaps, and I'm really keen to know from each of you one example of a roadmap you treat as a good one, like a roadmap of the country, a roadmap of a city, or some part of the city whatsoever. So one roadmap and maybe one tool, because to my mind, the good tool is the one which helps to collect data, the one which helps to finance, because any roadmap introduction needs finance, or the one which help to analyze, like, I don't know, calculate the footprint or whatsoever. So one roadmap and one tool from each of you would be like very, very great to explore and to get into the details. Thanks.
Who wants to go for it?
I can go.
Smith, please.
I mean, I'm going to say that our whole life carbon roadmap for the UK is a great roadmap. Do enjoy it. It's on the UK Green Building Council's website. And then in terms of a tool, thank you for the opportunity to talk about our Upgrading Britain's Homes tool, which is a calculator that looks at how much how many homes can be retrofitted, how many what we get in terms of it's really distracting when the other people are talking.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry. The health benefits, the social co-benefits of having that financing for home retrofit in the UK, because in the UK, 80% of the buildings that we're going to have in 2050 have already been built. So in order to decarbonise the building industry, we have to look at existing buildings. And so we're working at the moment with a number of partners to develop this calculator, and we're looking at the different policies that are coming out in advance of our general election that's expected next year to understand, well, what would each of these different kind of financing pledges realise in terms of those retrofit carbon emissions benefits, but also wider social and health benefits.
Maybe I also can come in. A tool that we have developed in another project framework is called Build Me tool, which is transparently calculating, so to say, the energy performance and the economic performance. So actually, and working with or talking to project developers and architects, the fact that first of all the tool is super user friendly and really gives you results within 2 minutes, and also highlights, so to say, the business case of the building is the convincing part actually. So if they see really, hey, okay, it might run up with some slightly higher capex, but long-term wise, you definitely will earn money. And the capex is also overestimated. So people think energy efficient measures might run up in 30 or 50% additional costs, which is not the fact. So it's sometimes even less than 5%. That is a convincing argument for project developers to consider to go for a low carbon solution. So also a freely available tool is focusing on Egypt, Jordan and Lebanon though, but you can test the tool also with other climate conditions, so to say. Welcome.
Yeah, I would say you can look at the roadmap which Nagpur city has developed, but also under the BEA, the number of roadmaps which have been developed by WRI as well, which really are useful. And it's not because we help that, but really these help you understand how to practice. What is really how you can make all this practical, actionable, because they help you break down really what actions can be done across the life cycle, and also how to break it down into smaller steps, targets, goals, and so on. Also, all these roadmaps contain technical measures, policy, but along with that, all the enabling elements as well, finance, capacity building. So there is a lot of knowledge that can be gained there. Also, a number of tools are available under the BEA platform as well. Thanks.
And I'm not going to lean myself out of the window and provide you with a good example of a roadmap, but I do want to say UN Habitat has a lot of tools that are about how to build local resilience, how to ensure that what you're doing at the city level is linked to what's happening at the national level, really how to involve vulnerable communities in all of that planning. But I also want to say one other point, which is we're having these discussions. I mean, here's these negotiations ongoing. What does that mean if you go back home? Because it's the ministers of environment, ministers of foreign affairs that are negotiating this. What does that mean for the cities, for the built environment afterwards? And actually, last year in Sharm el-Sheikh, for the first time, we brought ministers of housing and urbanization to a COP. We struggled to get them there because they're like, what is this? Why is this important for us? This year we did it again. We got overrun. We had over 60 ministers in the room, over 200 local government representatives. So this topic of, okay, well, you have discussions here at COP and then bringing them back home and implementing them across different ministries is something that's also, I think, the future.
Thank you. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to ask more questions because I'm 5 minutes late on my schedule. But what I want to say is that, the roadmap's quality depends very much on what you're going to find as data and information and some of the capacity. So, of course, you're not going to compare a Cambodian roadmap with the UK roadmap because in Cambodia, they don't have data, they don't have the information. It's a very different place, and it's even difficult to find experts that can work on this topic, national experts that can work on the topic. And if you go to the UK, you probably have a number of people that really know about the building sector with who you can strongly engage, and you probably have more data even if you don't have everything. I would also say that, some of the roadmaps that have been developed with our WRI under the Net Zero Carbon Buildings Accelerator program, I don't remember exactly the name, but anyway, I think they're very strong roadmaps, especially the Colombia roadmap, I think, has been a very good roadmap because it actually has been looking more on the finance side also in the implementation. But also, Colombia has a very strong banking sector, and they have a banking alliance that is really behind those things. So it also really depends on what you're going to have at the country level to be able to do it. And tools, I do hope that the tool that we're working on now will be an excellent tool also to help supporting developing roadmaps, of course. Okay, so that was the end of our first session, and I want to thank my speakers here, panel members, for having joined me on stage. So next we are moving more into actually country experiences. And I'm going to invite Meltem. So Meltem Bayraktar did it well, good. So he's a program manager on urban energy and climate in WRI Turkey. And Meltem is going to present about the Turkey roadmap that I think has been recently finalized.
Yes, it's completed last week and approved recently, and it will be launched in the next days, actually in the summer. So will be publicly available very soon. So we are very, very excited about it.
Well, we're curious to see.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very happy to be here today. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to briefly talk about the Turkey building sector decarbonization roadmap that we have developed recently. So the Turkey building sector decarbonization roadmap was prepared within Zero Carbon Building Accelerator initiative. It is an initiative, international initiative coordinated by World Resources Institute, and the initiative is supported by Global Environment Facility, GEF, and UNEP. And the initiative was established in 2021. And since then, and the initiative provides technical assistance as well as resources to national governments and local governments in creating national level and local level roadmaps and action plans addressing the building sector decarbonization efforts. So within ZCBA, Turkey and Colombia, as Jonathan mentioned, successfully completed their roadmap documents. Additionally, 8 cities prepared city-level action plans from Turkey, Colombia, from Costa Rica, Kenya, and India, Nagpur, the action plan that Nikhil just explained to us. You see in the graphic, in the map, the partners of the Zero Carbon Building Accelerator and the geographical regions they cover. So among our partners, we have WRI Mexico and WRI Turkey offices. And we have Green Building Council Colombia, Green Building Council Kenya and Costa Rica. World Green Building Council also supporting our technical activities. And an ICLEA South Asia chapter and South Asia and Southeast Asia chapter also among the Zero Carbon Building Accelerators partners. I think there's a lot of noise coming from the next room, but okay, I'll do my best. So the Turkey built the roadmap, building sector decarbonization. It's a very long name. The decarbonization roadmap is a very comprehensive document. So it tells the reader where the country is at the moment regarding the national policies concerning the built environment, the building stock, the capacities of the stakeholders, and it tells you where you need to be in 30 years if you want to realize your climate targets for the building sector. So we developed the Turkey roadmap following the 9 key steps that's shown right now on the screen. We started out, of course, with the stakeholder mapping. So we wanted to understand, first of all, who are the members of the building sector ecosystems members, what they do and where they are and what are their awareness levels regarding the building decarbonization. And then we prepared an engagement plan just to make sure that everybody will be involved throughout the project's activities. And then we did a lot of data collection. That was like the most difficult part of the project. So we tried to collect the data that is available, and we conducted a current state analysis, and then we successfully created a baseline, luckily, and also a growth projection for the building sector in Turkey. And the next step was to work to identify the barriers that all the stakeholders are facing while trying to create and implement highly energy efficient, renewable integrated, sustainable green buildings. And we also addressed the gaps. And then we created portfolios of mitigation measures to see like the reduction potential in the building sector. So we set up different scenarios. For instance, if the new buildings from now on are built as the Class B or Class A building according to the National Building Energy Performance Certification System, what happens? Like how much emissions can be avoided? So we did like this type of scenarios to understand like what is achievable, and that he helped us to define the scope of the work and to define the transformative actions that needed to be taken to achieve actually the reductions in the building sector. So we then drafted the roadmap. The roadmap has been reviewed by the stakeholders. We collected their opinions and insights. Then the document was, of course, updated accordingly and finalized. So we are happy to announce that the document is completed right now, but it will be published very soon with a launch event in December. So it will be publicly available. And also the action plans, city-level action plans, also followed the same process. The stakeholder engagement was one of the key work of our the efforts. So because the people who know what is what is wrong, like what can be done, what cannot be done, and what type of like obstacles they're facing. So we need to collect all this information. So we decided to create many opportunities for stakeholders to be involved in the project's actions. So we did a lot of panels, we did focus group meetings, we did many workshops, we did surveys, one-to-one interviews. So this way, like we created different opportunities, various the events for stakeholders to take part, and we did the events at the national level as well as local level to collect the information from the local level as well. So this was like very helpful in the end for us to put together the roadmap. So all the information in the roadmap are organized in 10 chapters. There is, of course, and obviously an introduction, and it's followed by the overview of the building sector in Turkey. This part includes the baseline and the future projection and the results of the impact analysis and the reduction scenarios. And the rest of the information are given in the construction and demolition of buildings. Building materials are addressed, existing and new buildings, like what we can do. What we can do to improve the existing buildings current situation and then make new buildings more energy efficient, resilient, and everything. And then renewable energy and especially integration to the buildings were discussed. We also added like climate resilience adaptation part to the work, even it's not a part of the mitigation actions. Still, we wanted to see like what in terms of the resilience and climate resilience and adaptation, where the current building stock is and what needs to be done. And so then we discuss about the finance that is needed for the realization of all the actions that are described in the roadmap. And finally, the gender equality introduces recommendations to improve the gender equality in the building sector. And all these subsectors includes like background, current states, barriers and gaps, goals, actions and stakeholders and their responsibilities, and some inspiration for stakeholders for to think about and take an action. So like each chapter can be like a standalone chapter. You can just, if like it's an interest for you, it's the building materials, and you can read the building materials, get an overview and general understanding of what's going on in this particular field. So this is just an example that shows the goals that are like how the goals are introduced in the roadmap and how the actions are organized. So the goals are introduced for short, medium, and long term, and the actions are categorized under policy, finance, technology, capacity building, and raising awareness. So the key takeaways, so what we achieved, like what we are proud about, is that we were able to introduce a whole life cycle national policy. So in Turkey, the policies concerning the building sector, they only focus on the operational performance of the buildings. There is even a near the zero and aberrant energy building regulation, which is like quite advanced for many countries, but the regulations did not have this whole life cycle building approach, so we were able to introduce this through this national roadmap. And it is like the first building sector specific roadmap and action plans, and it addresses the adaptation and climate resilience as well. And then it contributes to the alignment of local action plans with the national goals through also like their true pilot projects. Also, we were able to like start implementing what we've described already in the action plan. So the key actions, just like what it means, what it tells about is like prefabricated modular construction are discussed, clean vehicles, equipment using construction, embodied energy, carbon regulations are introduced, environmental product declaration national system is advised to be developed, so, and enhancement of existing energy performance certification system to report on embodied energy and carbon is advised. Building material database development is advised as an action. The climate resilience regulations should be developed, that is also highlighted in the roadmap. The building passport should be introduced. The renovation campaign like across the country should be planned and introduced, and building electrification roadmap has to be prepared. All these like addressed in the roadmap as the recommendations. So that will be all. And lastly, this is like the pilot project that just started, kicked off. It is going to be a green public library building that our pilot city, Konya Metropolitan Municipality is just building. So it will be the first public building certified with the National Green Building and Certification System that was launched last year by the government. So it will constitute a model for new public buildings. And so a higher efficiency, the building will have higher energy efficiency rate, renewable integration, materials and construction will be also addressed during the construction phase, and it will be an awareness raising tool for public and the professionals. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Milton.
And the digital copies of the roadmap and the local action plans will be very soon available right now, but you can find information about the project on the website. But we will put them as soon as the launch event is over during the December. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Meltem. And you're going to stay with us here on scene, and I'm going to invite a few more panelists here. So it is my pleasure to invite Mrs. Naila Ahmed Noor, who is the Joint Secretary of the Ministry of Housing and Public Works in Bangladesh. And I would also like to invite Chris Pobi Abe, who is the Principal Architect of the Ministry of Works and Housing in Ghana. And then my colleague Mustafa Diop from Senegal, who is the Technical Counselor to the Director of Construction and Housing in Senegal. So I guess I'm going to sit in the middle again. Oh, sorry. Taking my watch out. So thank you all. So I'm going to start with a question. Actually, I have a common question that is for Naila, for Chris, and for Mustafa. And that question is, Bangladesh, Ghana, and Senegal are working in the development of a buildings and construction roadmap. What would you like to achieve with this process? What are your main objectives? And ladies first, so I will invite Naila to start.
Assalamu alaikum, good evening. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a very honor and pleasure to be here to share the stories of Bangladesh. And I am privileged to say that from historically, the Bangladesh is a less carbon emission country because the building sector is rationally sustainable because we use the local products, you use the local technologies which are more or less carbon footprint, less carbon emission to the atmosphere. That's why Bangladesh is a very low carbon emission country because it is less than 1 ton carbon dioxide per capita. But when the booming of the development going on and the construction industry is going on, there are things like we are shifting our building materials from some low carbon emission to high carbon emission like that. Because first of all, I have to tell about the brick sector because initially we use the bricks, mud bricks we used, but in gradually it shifted to the burnt clay. Burnt brick, so carbon dioxide emission going high, and then slowly we shifted it again. By 2025, we have to use the building brick blocks like that, which is using by the dredges soil from the river because we have more than 400 rivers. So the dredge soil, and with some admixtures and other things, we use sunburn bricks to this sector. And these things are still we have some acts and policies because from the beginning we have that BANBC, Bangladesh National Building Code, which has two parts. First of all, it has an enforcement part little bit because it is a code. There we said about the energy efficiency as well as the sustainable building materials. As well as we have some urban planning. We have the urban planning, which is sustainable urban planning, like that in the areas remote to Bangladesh. Some of the areas are in the rivers, which we call the chor areas, and some areas in the sea also. We have isolated islands. These isolated islands, whenever we do the urban planning process, there are some isolated areas. These isolated areas have some targeted area where we put the solar and the renewable energy projects like there. So there is a baseline, I think so, but we have to go more on these issues or like that. and especially for the new buildings and the existing buildings. That is more have to be focused because the building life cycle system, we have so many other things we have to incorporate. At the same time, we are targeted all the governmental building sectors because 2025 we are focused on the governmental efforts, but left alone the private sectors, which is more than 2/3 of the construction process. So all these things should be hopefully we can incorporate in the roadmaps, and looking forward to work more about this sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naila. Thank you. Looking at Chris first, and then I'll go to Mustafa. So, Chris, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you all. With Ghana, I want to take it from three levels. Following from the Paris Agreement, we were able to revise 19 of our policies and 47 programs. Unfortunately, with the building sector contributing to 37% of carbon emission, the building sector and the construction sector doesn't find expression in our NDCs. So the first point of call is to collaborate and link up with the Ministry of Environment and see how best we can incorporate some of these action areas in our NDCs so that moving forward we can also attract financing to implement some of these programs. Be as it may, we have a building code which also tries to implement some of these emission issues. And currently we've also developed a building regulation which we call the LI 2465, which also tries as much as possible to incorporate some of these action areas in our building and construction industry. So moving forward, what we want to do is to leverage on this roadmap and see how best we can consolidate and harmonize some of these action areas, make it more robust, make it more implementable, so that moving forward we'll be able to bring all actors on board and be able to implement some of these roadmaps in our building and construction industry. How do we do this? We want to, as much as possible, have this feature in our sector medium-term plans. We don't want a situation where we develop these roadmaps and they'll be sitting on shelves. Once we are able to put it within our sector medium-term framework, we'll be able to allocate budgetary allocations onto this roadmap and moving forward, make it more implementable. Thirdly, we also need to bring actors on board. Most of the time this morning I spoke about it. We handle some of these things at the national level. At the city level, at the local level, how do we bring people on board? How do we build capacity? How do we bring people on board to also accept some of these roadmaps as we implement them moving forward? If you don't bring them on board in Ghana, we have my ministry sitting at the national level developing policies for the building and construction industry. But when it comes to implementation, it sits with another sector ministry. So then how do we collaborate and bring those within the local or the city level also on board to find some of these roadmaps, having expression in their local plans to be able to implement them at the local level? So in all, I would say on three legs, we have to engage the Ministry of Environment to see how best we have the building and construction industry featuring on our NDC. Secondly, we have to also leverage on the existing building codes and the regulations to come out with a robust and implementable action areas moving forward within our sector. And lastly, to bring every people on board from the national level to the local level to ensure that whatever roadmap we develop will be implementable and will be, felt on the ground at the city level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. I'm going to give the floor to Mustafa. Mustafa, you will speak in French, so I'll probably do a translation after that.
Bonjour à tout le monde. Tout d'abord, je m'excuse de transformer Jonathan en traducteur, mais j'ai pas trop le choix. Donc, pour cette feuille de route, nos objectifs sont clairs. Nous souhaitons, avec ce processus, formaliser le secteur du bâtiment au Sénégal. Vous savez, au Sénégal, on a un secteur très informel dans le secteur du bâtiment. Presque 80% des constructions sont de l'autoconstruction du secteur informel, qu'on ne maîtrise pas, qui n'est pas bien cadré. Donc nous avons un réel problème de documentation sur les bâtiments et les problèmes de données. Donc nos objectifs, c'est de pouvoir travailler, nous appuyer sur cette feuille de route déjà pour avoir de la documentation, avoir de la donnée, mais aussi avoir une ordre de priorité sur les actions que nous devons mener pour la réalisation de ces constructions durables. Nous souhaitons aussi travailler pour définir c'est quoi le bâtiment du futur au Sénégal, c'est quoi le bâtiment durable, parce que nous avons beaucoup de problèmes pour s'accorder sur quelque chose, et aussi l'usage des matériaux. Nous sommes en train de travailler sur les zones climatiques, parce qu'au Sénégal, il y a 5 zones climatiques, et nous souhaitons dans chaque zone définir les matériaux qui sont le plus adaptés pour pouvoir avancer un peu sur ces types de constructions qui seront beaucoup plus adaptés. Et comme on l'a dit aussi, cette feuille de route sera pour nous un guide. Nous en avons besoin parce qu'il nous en manque énormément. Et elle est assez conforme avec nos stratégies. Parce que déjà, il y a 2 ans, nous avons mis en place un comité scientifique sur le bâtiment durable pour rassembler tous les acteurs pour voir les types de construction. C'était bien avant même que le projet arrive au Sénégal. Donc ce projet est arrivé et est devenu très conforme avec les objectifs que nous nous sommes fixés et la démarche que nous avons commencée. C'est pourquoi la collaboration n'a pas du tout été difficile avec UN. Elle appuie depuis 2022. Et aussi en 2022, nous avons procédé à la révision de nos codes, les codes de construction et les codes de l'urbanisme. Déjà, sur ces nouvelles codes qui vont entrer en vigueur, nous avons énormément travaillé sur ces questions de durabilité dans les bâtiments, sur l'efficacité énergétique, en nous appuyant aussi sur les recommandations régionales et sous-régionales, notamment les directives de l'UMOA. Et donc, nous souhaitons nous appuyer énormément sur cette feuille de route qui sera notre outil stratégique pour améliorer, voire réviser. Parce que comme vous le savez, au Sénégal, quasiment tous les 10 ans, on révise la code de la construction et de l'urbanisme. Et cette feuille de route sera pour nous un outil une fois qu'on l'élabore. Parce que sur les travaux qui ont déjà commencé, une fois qu'on l'élabore, elle sera un outil. Et la prochaine révision du code, nous nous appuierons beaucoup dessus. Et c'est l'occasion aussi de dire que depuis l'Alliance a été lancée au mois de juillet, nous avons énormément avancé. Parce que déjà, nous avons défini les 3 groupes de travail qui doivent être faits. Ils ont déjà commencé à avoir de la documentation de travail dessus. Nous avons mis en place l'alliance avec tous les acteurs. Parce qu'au Sénégal, on a énormément d'acteurs qui travaillent sur ça. Avec le ministère des Mines sur les questions des sols, le ministère de l'Environnement. Et les gens travaillent à vase clos. Donc nous voulons, avec cette alliance, mettre tout le monde autour d'une table et travailler dessus. Récemment, avant de quitter le Sénégal, je viens de finir l'arrêté interministériel regroupant tous les acteurs. À cela s'ajoute, on a défini les groupes de travail avec les groupes d'ONU Habitat là-bas, lancé et commencé les travaux. Donc entre juillet et maintenant, nous avons énormément avancé. Donc nous espérons que cette feuille de route nous aidera à atteindre tous ces objectifs qui ont été visés.
Merci Mustafa. Okay, my turn now. So he was first apologizing to make me a translator, which is much appreciated. But basically, there's very clear objectives already that they have in the sector, and they've already been working. They've already been working quite a bit on this specific sector because there is a regional energy efficiency regulation that already came up for all the countries of the WAEMU, which is the West African Organization of Countries. I'm not going to say the exact title of it, but one of their main challenges is that 80% is actually informal construction. So they're really looking at the roadmaps to actually help them a little bit formalizing more the construction sector overall, and so that the housing sector. Just to say that actually our focus with the roadmaps in the 4 countries where we're working now is also looking specifically at housing, because that is an area that is important in all these countries, and it's also, I said it before, but if we succeed the transformation in the housing sector, I think we'll succeed everywhere. So that's, I think, a very important element, and that's why also we're working with our colleagues from UN Habitat. The challenges are, of course, related to some of the regulations, and the roadmap will help identifying what really needs to be done on some of the regulations going forward. They will also come up with what are the priorities specifically, and then also to define what really a sustainable building is for Senegal, because they have 5 different climatic zones, and in the 5 different climatic zones you might want to look at the building in a different way. And then specifically also looking at the materials. There's quite a bit of work already happening on materials and trying to look at local materials specifically in Senegal. And so that's an element that is strongly highlighted here. So overall, it's going to serve as a strong guidance, and it's well aligned with already because they have established a scientific committee for the building and construction sector last year. So it's kind of nice that they have this now strong policy work that will be aligned also with the work of their scientific committee. And what he was mentioning also, what Mustafa was mentioning to me, is that they already have now established what they call the National Alliance for Senegal, where they have 3 different working groups, and there's an official circular that has been prepared just before he came here. So that's now officially launched to have this National Alliance. So this is going to be the steps for Senegal specifically. And I hope I made justice to what you said. Good. So as the next point, I wanted to actually ask something to Meltem. Because Meltem, you've been listening here to what our colleagues have been discussing from their countries, and you are the only one sitting on this panel that kind of finalized the roadmap with Turkey. And so I wanted to hear a little bit like from your perspective, and some of it you might already have mentioned during your presentation, but thinking about some of the main benefits and challenges of the process. So more talking about the process and how the process is important of the roadmap. It's not only about having a roadmap at the end, but it's really about the process also. That is a key, that is really something that helps. So please, over to you.
Thank you. Well, having a plan is really important. Like you know what you're going to do, and so we started with the baseline, but the largest biggest challenge that we faced was about collection of data, like concerning the existing building stock. This data is sometimes it's not, some of this data is not available, or it's not readily available, or it's available in different sources. So you need to gather it, like bring it together, consolidate the data, and make like a meaningful result from it. So this was the challenging. Like you will need the data, like the number of buildings, for instance, and where they are located, the total floor area, the rate of demolishment, the rate of recovery, the geographical distribution of the buildings. Without having all this information, you cannot really tell like how much your building stock consumes energy, where it is consumed, and like how much the emissions that the building sector causes from different building typologies. We needed this to establish a baseline, so we can actually develop the scenarios, like mitigation scenarios based on the baseline, and test a few scenarios and set the goals, realistic goals in the end. So this was very challenging, but what we did was like we diversified our resources, so we did not rely on only the national statistics or the official information that are provided through the ministries. So we got them as much as we could, but then we connected with the stakeholders. Like stakeholders been very helpful with the data collection, actually, because like some of them are like the unions representing the architects and engineers, some of them are unions representing the material producers. So they can also collect data. They have their own, their way, their own databases. So like engaging them with the project and convincing them to be part of, like feel like the partner of this project really helped us. So like they opened up to us their databases. So in the end, we were able to collect like data that makes sense when it comes together, and we were able to construct a model that can be like from now on can be used to understand like the future, like the implementation of the actions, and it will have its impact it will have on the future.
Thank you very much. I mean, data is really, we know it from many places, a challenge and an issue, and definitely that's why also you need to bring all the stakeholders on board, because a lot of the private partners, definitely developers and all that, also work on their own to actually collect some data, and that's also a very important way. It's not only at the government level that you will find the data that you need. In the end, I know Nikhil earlier from ICLE mentioned that, okay, it's important to start identifying your priorities even if you don't have the data. That's true, but in the end, I think in all the roadmaps, data is an action that needs to be there. The collection of data, the databases, because in the end, when you're going to go to the financiers, then you actually really need to have the data, because they are only actually basing their decisions on strong data. So data is really something really important to work on, and establishing a platform where you can actually collect well your data will be really important going forward. And that's where I saw, for example, the building passport put forward in Turkey. That's, for example, a very good tool, to help really collecting the data on different buildings. Very good. So I have another question for my three friends that are starting with their roadmaps. And Chris mentioned a little bit earlier that, a roadmap is good, but a roadmap doesn't replace your national planning documents, your sectoral planning documents. And you also know that actually, if I'm a development partner, or if I'm the World Bank, or even UNDP or whoever, when I go in the country, I look at your national development plan, I look at your sectoral plans, and I say, okay, this is what I'm going to support. If what you do with the roadmap is not integrated there, then on the one end, your domestic resources will not go that direction, but a lot of the international aid will not go in that direction also. The roadmap on itself is not something that you can sell to someone for saying like, okay, help me implementing. It actually also needs to be integrated into the national policies and national plans, the sectoral plans and all that. So the question here was like, okay, how do you plan to take your roadmap, or what are the steps that you are thinking of taking your roadmap to actually do that integration? And I'm going to change the order this time, and I will start with Senegal. Donc, l'intégration dans les politiques nationales de ce qui va sortir de la roadmap, comment vous pensez le faire?
Bon, pour l'intégration, comment nous pensons le faire? Comme j'avais dit, nous déjà, on avait commencé une belle dynamique en voulant créer un comité scientifique sur le green building. Donc, la feuille de route est arrivée à un point nommé, on travaille dessus. Et maintenant, ce qu'on souhaite faire, c'est qu'une fois, parce que ce projet va durer 1 an ou 2 ans, qu'on puisse pérenniser les actions, qu'on puisse le transformer. Notre souhait, ce qu'on s'est dit en ce moment, c'est de transformer ce comité qui regroupe l'ensemble des acteurs en un secrétariat permanent. Un secrétariat permanent avec un arrêté interministériel qui va regrouper tous les ministères concernés, mais sous la présidence du ministère en charge de la construction, et qui va se retrouver tous les 6 mois pour discuter sur ces questions. Bien évidemment, les résultats sortis de cette feuille de route qui seront appliqués, qu'on puisse tous les 6 mois se rencontrer et prendre des décisions. C'est ce que j'ai dit précédemment, raison pour laquelle nous avons même travaillé aujourd'hui sur un arrêté ministériel dont moi j'ai déjà fini la rédaction et tout, qui est soumis à l'autorité pour validation. Donc c'est de cette manière-là qu'on compte vraiment travailler pour vraiment pérenniser toutes les actions, parce que nous souhaitons que cette feuille de route soit vraiment, comme je l'ai dit, l'outil principal qui nous permettra de définir nos politiques en matière de durabilité.
Okay, thank you very much. So, some parts that I probably didn't translate enough earlier, because you already mentioned some of those points, but so the idea, the committee that is being established now, the idea is that it's an interministerial committee, so that makes sure that all the other ministries that also have a role to play in the sector are actually involved. And the objective is to keep that committee alive and to ensure that the committee meets every 6 months and can work on this integration of what comes out of the roadmap, and also monitor, in a sense, the implementation of the priority actions that have been put forward. Naila, turning to you. Ladies first.
No problem. Thank you again. The main part of the integration process of this roadmap is because we are in the upper hand, because the Ministry of Housing and Public Works is the more sole agency to do the most of the legislative part of the building sector of the country, and to some extent implementation only the government sector. So it's the main challenge is to make this thing happen inside the construction process and everything which is done by the Ministry of Housing and Public Works, and as it is the local level, it can be translated to the national level to local institutions, as well as the Ministry of Local Government, as well well as it has to be scaling up with the private sector. As the Building Construction Committee, which is done by the Ministry of Housing and Public Works to the local level. So they are authorized to give permission to make buildings. So they can take the initiative or these roadmaps, and the first of the thing is assessment. What is already said here, the assessment of the existing building and the enforcement to the new building. So I will more focus on the implementation part of this roadmap and connect it to the other national 5-year plan or other ministries' plan of action. So this is the part I have to say.
Thank you, Naila. I mean, definitely the local, bringing it to the local and local government's engagement is because we mentioned it earlier, there are a key implementer in a sense for the roadmap. But Chris, over to you.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail right on the head. And as a country, in Ghana, we have what we call the National Medium-Term Policy Framework. And currently it's spanning between 2022 to 2025. And our sector also have to develop a sector medium-term framework that fits into the national medium-term framework, which also aligns with international frameworks such as the Agenda 63 of Africa, AU, and then the SDG goals, especially goal 11 and 13. So what we intend doing is to try and find the roadmap having expression in our sector medium-term framework. The completion of the roadmap will coincide with the preparation of our next sector medium-term framework. So the agenda or the plan is to incorporate some of these action areas within our sector medium-term framework so that we can have budgetary support, as you mentioned, and the international community too can also come on board to support in the implementation. Otherwise, you develop the framework, you develop the roadmap. If it doesn't have expression in your sector medium-term frameworks, you don't have anything to implement. Secondly, Leah spoke about collaboration. It's something that is very critical. Like I did mention earlier on, as a ministry, we develop policies for the building and construction sector. But when it comes to implementation, it sits with another sector ministry. That is where the collaboration has to be there. At the city level, how do we collaborate to also make sure that this roadmap that we develop will also find expression in their sector medium term at the city level? So that when it comes to implementation, although we have the national level sector medium term, at the local level too, they are also having, these roadmaps finding expression in their action areas. Lastly, we need to also find a way of also building what we called institutional linkages. At our ministry currently, we've set up a desk where we want to coordinate some of these activities. If we don't coordinate some of these activities, you have people or the institutions working in silos, and it will not help. So we want to build that desk that will coordinate all these activities to align all our objectives so that moving forward, when it comes to implementation, we'll be speaking one language. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Timing is always an important element, I think. So, it's very nice that it comes timely as you have your exercise for your sector coming up just after the roadmap is ready. And I think that's a really important element. We have many projects where we come with roadmaps and all that, but they're absolutely not aligned with the process at the national level. And then sometimes it starts to be outdated when it comes to the moment to do the integration. So I'm very pleased to hear that. You mentioned also medium-term expenditure frameworks. These are very important elements because that's where you really need to get your actions in, because that's the only way that the government is going to put their resources also to support the implementation of those actions. So linking with those financial, I would say, mechanisms that the government has for their own budget is a very important element to see the implementation of the roadmaps happen. And then, collaboration. We're talking here all about collaboration, but I think it's even more important in this sector where it can be really more complicated than in a number of other sectors. And there's so much so much links also to some other sectors when you're talking about the buildings and construction sector. You talk about the industry with the materials. You talk about, some of the workers. So it's a really, really important element to have that coordination between the different ministries. I can take another few small minutes and Meltem, I was wondering, if there was something that you wanted to share about, some of the lessons, because you just did your roadmap, and here I have my friends that are starting this process. What can you tell them? What do you want to tell them? To say, what do you want to tell them to actually be successful?
Well, I can firstly engage the stakeholders at the early stages of the roadmap development process. Don't see the stakeholders as the groups that you introduce what you did. Instead, it should be they have to be involved in the creation of the process and right from the beginning, not once you're advanced with your studies and have something to explain to them. No, it should be right from the beginning they should be involved. Another lessons learned is about the setting the targets. The targets should be ambitious, bold, but they should be also realistic, achievable and doable, and not overly intimidating the decision makers. Especially the targets for the short term and medium term. Yeah, for the long term, yes, we really need bold targets because we have to achieve the decarbonization, eliminate completely the emissions in the building sector. But for the medium and short term, they should be in line with the current specific situation of this country. So while being bold, and they have to be realistic. So that's the key.
Very good points and very important points. So I think we are going to close here, and I want to thank you all very much for being here, joining us. And what I definitely want to say is that we need all the countries to get the vision and roadmaps for this sector. It's really important that people start to see that this needs to be transformed. Because it's important for us as people. We all live in a house, we all work in buildings. It's where we spend, I think, about 80 to 90% of our time, we spend it in buildings. In reality, we sleep there. So we spend a lot of time sleeping, unfortunately, also. No, it's not depressing, it's the reality. It's the reality. It's also the identity of the people and the cultural identity in many ways also. And everybody wants a home where they feel safe and good. So thank you very much. Thanks for having stayed with us, and looking forward to the next time where we continue talking about implementation and where we have succeeded all these roadmaps.